The airport was full of energy that morning. Long lines moved slowly, and the sound of rolling suitcases filled the air. Families hugged, friends laughed, and travelers rushed from one gate to another. In the middle of all that noise stood Maya, a young black girl who was only 16 years old. Her heart was beating fast, not because she was afraid, but because she was so excited. She held her new passport in both hands as if it were the most precious treasure she owned. This passport was not just a book with stamps and numbers. For Maya, it was a door that was about to open, a door to a dream she had been waiting for. Maya had worked hard for months to get into an international student program. She had spent long nights writing essays, attending interviews, and studying different cultures. When she finally got her acceptance letter, her parents were so proud that they cried. They had saved money little by little, cutting down on their own needs just so she could travel abroad and represent her school. For Maya, this trip was not just about travel. It was about proving to herself and her family that dreams could come true if you kept working toward them. Her father hugged her tightly before she left home that morning. "Remember, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is your time. You carry our love with you. Be confident." Her mother kissed her on the forehead and slipped a small note into her pocket. "Read this when you feel nervous," she whispered. Maya promised them she would be careful, and with her backpack and passport in hand, she set off to the airport with joy written all over her face. As she stood in line at the boarding gate, she couldn't help but look around. People were from different countries, speaking different languages, carrying different styles of bags and clothes. She thought to herself, this is what the world looks like, so big, so colorful, and so full of life. She imagined herself stepping off the plane in another country, meeting new friends, and sharing stories about where she came from. Her smile was wide, her eyes were shining, and she clutched her passport a little tighter. She whispered a small prayer of thanks for the chance she had been given. But not far from where Maya stood was Clara, the flight attendant on duty that morning. Clara was in her mid-30s, tall, and sharp-looking. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, and her hair tied back in a neat bun. From the outside, she looked professional, but inside, she carried frustration. It had been a long week of back-to-back flights, and she was not in the best mood. Her colleagues often whispered that Clara was strict with passengers, sometimes too strict, and that she liked to show her authority more than she needed to. She had built a reputation of being someone who rarely smiled, someone who always found fault in little things. As the line moved forward, Clara's eyes scanned the passengers. She nodded quickly at families, checked documents with a cold hand, and barely made eye contact with most of them. When Maya finally reached the front, she offered her brightest smile and handed over her passport with respect. Clara looked at Maya for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. Instead of smiling back, she raised an eyebrow and flipped open the passport. Her fingers moved slowly over the pages, as if she were looking for something wrong. Maya stood quietly, waiting. She remembered what her father had told her, be confident. But as Clara continued to stare at her passport with suspicion, Maya began to feel her heart beat faster. "Is there something wrong?" she asked politely. Clara didn't answer at first. She just flipped the passport back and forth, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're traveling alone?" Clara finally asked, her tone sharp. Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm part of a student exchange program. My group will meet me when I land." She tried to explain clearly, her voice calm and respectful. Clara looked at her again, this time with doubt in her eyes. Something about Maya's young age and quiet voice made her assume things that weren't true. Instead of asking for a supervisor or verifying details, Clara let her own thoughts cloud her judgment. She thought to herself, this doesn't look right. How can such a young girl be traveling internationally on her own? Her tone grew colder. "Are you sure this is your passport?" she asked, almost as if accusing Maya of lying. The people behind Maya in line began to shift uncomfortably, noticing the sharpness in Clara's voice. Maya swallowed hard, but she kept her manners. "Yes, ma'am, this is mine. I just got it a few weeks ago." She tried to smile again, hoping to ease the tension, but Clara's face remained stone cold. Clara tapped the passport against her palm and sighed loudly, as if she were tired of dealing with such situations. Maya's excitement started to fade. She thought of her mother's note in her pocket and her father's hug that morning. She reminded herself not to cry, not to show weakness, even though her stomach was now tied with nerves. The line behind them grew longer. A man coughed impatiently, and a woman looked at her watch. Some passengers were beginning to whisper, wondering why the young girl was being held up for so long. One older lady nearby whispered to her husband, "She looks innocent. Why are they giving her such a hard time?" Maya could hear bits of the whispers, and though some were supportive, it made her feel even more nervous being the center of attention. Clara turned the passport around again and gave Maya a look of disbelief. Instead of treating her with kindness, she let suspicion take over. "I don't know," Clara muttered under her breath, loud enough for Maya to hear. "This doesn't feel right." Maya's hands tightened around the handle of her small suitcase. "Please," she said softly, "I promise this is real. I've been so excited for this trip." But Clara wasn't listening to her heart, only to her own bias and tiredness. The coldness in her eyes made Maya feel smaller by the second. At that moment, the world around Maya seemed to slow down. The cheerful airport sounds, the rolling bags, the announcements, the chatter of travelers faded into the background. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat and the sharp flipping sound of Clara's fingers turning through the passport pages again and again. For Maya, what was supposed to be the happiest morning of her life was slowly becoming a moment of fear and doubt. She stood there, her eyes wide, trying not to let the tears spill, hoping desperately that someone would see the truth in her eyes, that she was just a young girl ready to start her journey, not someone to be doubted or treated unfairly. Maya stood frozen at the gate, her small suitcase beside her and her passport still trapped in Clara's hands. The flight attendant's sharp eyes scanned her again, as if searching for guilt on her young face. Around them, the boarding line grew restless, and the low hum of whispers began to fill the air. Maya wished with all her heart that she could just blend in like the other travelers, but instead, every eye seemed fixed on her. She shifted uncomfortably, her palms damp with sweat. She wanted to speak, to explain again, but something about Clara's cold expression made her hesitate. Clara's lips curled into a frown. She held the passport up higher, almost as if displaying it to the crowd. "This doesn't look authentic," she announced in a firm voice that carried further than necessary. The words made Maya's stomach sink. Her mouth opened in shock, but before she could reply, Clara did something that made the entire gate gasp. With one swift, careless motion, Clara bent the passport and tore into its corner. The ripping sound cut through the air like a blade, sharp and final. Maya's eyes widened in horror. "No," she cried, her voice trembling, but it was too late. She reached out instinctively, trying to grab the document back, but Clara held it out of reach with one hand while the torn piece fluttered to the floor. For Maya, it felt like her entire dream was being ripped apart in that single cruel moment. Her heart pounded in her chest so hard it hurt. The document she had treasured, the one she had shown her parents with such pride, was now damaged in the hands of someone who didn't believe her. Tears blurred her vision, but she fought them back. She didn't want to look weak, not in front of this woman, not in front of all the strangers who were now staring at her. Still, her throat tightened, and her voice shook when she spoke. "Please, that's my real passport. I need it for this trip. I didn't do anything wrong." Clara didn't soften. Instead, she gave a small, dismissive laugh. You expect me to believe that, she said, her voice dripping with doubt. I've seen plenty of forgeries in my time. This one's no different. We can't let just anyone on board with fake papers. Her words were meant to sound professional, but the way she said them felt more like an insult. The crowd reacted almost instantly. A woman in line gasped and clutched her bag tighter. A man whispered angrily to his wife, "She didn't even check properly. How can she just rip it like that?" Another passenger pulled out their phone quietly, beginning to record the scene. People were no longer just watching silently, they were unsettled, shocked by what they had seen. Maya's body trembled as she bent down to pick up the torn piece of her passport from the ground. She held it gently, as though it were a wounded bird she needed to protect. Her eyes filled with pain as she looked at Clara again. "My parents trusted me with this trip," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Do you know how hard they worked for me to come here? This isn't fair." But Clara only crossed her arms and looked away. Her tone was clipped, final. "Step aside, young lady. You're holding up the line." With a wave of her hand, she motioned for the next passenger to come forward. The words hit Maya like a slap, cold and dismissive, as though her hopes and struggles meant nothing. The girl's body refused to move. Her feet stayed planted on the floor, her hands clutching the torn passport against her chest. She couldn't just walk away. If she did, everything she had dreamed of would vanish. Behind her, people shifted uncomfortably. Some frowned at Clara, others at Maya's trembling shoulders. The air was heavy with tension, like a storm about to break. Finally, an older gentleman with silver hair spoke up. He stepped out of line and pointed a finger toward Clara. "I saw what you did," he said firmly. His voice was calm but carried authority. "That was uncalled for. She's just a child." His words gave courage to others. A woman nodded quickly. "Yes, I saw it too. She didn't even give her a chance." Another man added, "You can't just tear official documents like that. That's not your decision to make." The whispers turned into a wave of disapproval directed at Clara. The more people spoke, the more her face stiffened. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed through her eyes. Still, she tried to hold her ground. "It's protocol," she insisted, her voice slightly louder now, as if she could drown out the murmurs. "I'm doing my job. We can't take risks with international flights." But the passengers weren't convinced. Their eyes told the story, they had seen an innocent girl treated with cruelty, and they didn't buy the excuse. Phones continued to record, capturing every detail, every word. Clara shifted uncomfortably, her hands tightening on the boarding documents in front of her. Meanwhile, Maya stood motionless, her chest rising and falling quickly with each shallow breath. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run back into her parents' arms, but she forced herself to stay strong. She thought about her mother's note tucked in her pocket. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she pulled it out and unfolded it. The note had just a few words written in her mother's neat handwriting: "You are stronger than you know. Don't give up." The message made her eyes brim with fresh tears, but it also gave her a spark of courage. She wiped her face, stood a little taller, and said in a louder voice, "This passport is mine. It's not fake. You hurt it for no reason, and you embarrassed me in front of everyone. I don't deserve this." Her voice carried across the gate, and the murmurs grew louder. Passengers began shaking their heads, some muttering that they would complain to the airline. Clara's jaw tightened. She looked around and realized that the crowd was no longer silent, no longer supportive of her authority. Instead, they were watching her with judgment, their eyes hard and unforgiving. The atmosphere grew heavier by the second. Maya could feel it pressing down on her shoulders, but at the same time, she sensed something shifting. She wasn't alone anymore. The strangers around her had seen the truth, and their whispers of support were like small lights flickering in the darkness. Clara's face flushed slightly, though she tried to hide it. She waved her hand again, more impatiently this time. "Step aside," she repeated, but her voice no longer carried the same confidence. It wavered, just a little, betraying the fear that was beginning to creep in. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, a new voice entered the scene, deep, calm, and firm. "What's going on here?" It was the voice of Mr. Daniels, the senior crew member. He had been watching from a distance, but now he was walking over, his eyes focused on the torn passport in Maya's trembling hands. The passengers fell silent for a moment, waiting to see what he would do. Clara straightened her shoulders, trying to look confident again. But Maya's heart skipped a beat. For the first time since her nightmare began, she felt a tiny flicker of hope. Mr. Daniels walked with steady steps toward the gate, his presence calm but commanding. He was a man in his 50s, with years of experience in the airline industry. His uniform was neat, his silver hair brushed back, and his eyes sharp with awareness. Passengers who had been whispering instantly grew quiet, as though they trusted that this man would finally bring order to the situation. Maya turned toward him with wide eyes, holding the torn passport close to her chest. She didn't speak right away. Her voice felt trapped in her throat, but deep inside she hoped he would see what she had gone through. Clara, on the other hand, straightened her back, lifted her chin, and tried to put on a confident expression. "This young girl was trying to board with a suspicious passport," Clara said quickly, before Mr. Daniels could even ask. "I checked it myself. It didn't look real. So, I did what needed to be done." Her voice carried authority, but there was a hint of unease hiding under her words. Mr. Daniels stopped in front of Maya. He gently extended his hand. "May I see the passport, please?" His tone was polite, nothing like Clara's coldness. Maya nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she gave it to him. She looked down at the floor, afraid of what he might say. He examined it carefully, turning the pages with practiced precision. His brows furrowed slightly as he checked the holograms, the seals, and the print. Then his eyes moved to the ripped corner, and his jaw tightened. He closed the passport and looked straight at Clara. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but heavy with disapproval. "This is a genuine government-issued passport," he said firmly. "There is no mistake here. The only mistake was damaging it without proper procedure." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few people muttered things like, "I knew it," and, "She was right." Maya's chest rose quickly as she tried to hold back tears of relief. For the first time, someone believed her. Someone in authority had spoken the truth. Clara's face went pale. She shook her head, forcing a nervous smile. "With respect, sir, I thought I was protecting the airline. Forged passports are a real risk. I didn't want to put us in danger by letting her through." Her words came quickly, like a defense she had prepared. But Mr. Daniels wasn't convinced. He turned slightly and addressed the passengers. "Did anyone see what happened here?" he asked. Almost immediately, several voices rose at once. "She tore it without warning," said one man, holding up his phone. "I recorded it," another woman added, showing the screen that displayed Clara's reckless action. Others nodded and spoke up, telling how Clara had dismissed Maya, mocked her, and ripped her document without reason. The weight of the testimonies filled the air like heavy stones pressing down. Clara's confidence faltered. She opened her mouth to argue again but quickly closed it when she saw how many eyes were on her, eyes that were filled with judgment and disappointment. Maya, still clutching her bag, finally found her voice. It came out small at first, but steady. "I didn't lie," she said, looking at Mr. Daniels. "This trip means everything to me. My parents saved for it. I've been working hard for this. I don't deserve to be treated like I did something wrong. Her words were simple, but they carried all the weight of her pain. Mr. Daniels nodded at her with respect. "You're absolutely right," he replied. "And you will not miss this trip because of someone else's poor judgment." His words felt like a shield wrapping around her, protecting her from the cruelty she had endured. The crowd began clapping softly, a sign of support for Maya. Even strangers who didn't know her were moved by her courage to speak up despite her tears. The man with the silver hair who had spoken earlier added loudly, "She deserves an apology. Right here, right now." Clara's hands fidgeted as she tried to maintain control. She looked at Mr. Daniels, hoping he might back her up. But his stern gaze made it clear that her actions were inexcusable. "Clara," he said slowly, "you've crossed a line today. You've embarrassed this airline, you've hurt a young passenger, and you've made a serious mistake of judgment." The words stung. Clara's mouth went dry. She glanced around desperately, but everywhere she looked, people's eyes condemned her. Some shook their heads, others whispered angrily. She could even hear the faint sound of someone saying, "She should lose her job for this." Maya stood quietly, tears finally rolling down her cheeks. But they were no longer tears of fear, they were tears of release, of knowing that justice was beginning to show itself. She wiped her face quickly with the back of her hand, refusing to look defeated. Mr. Daniels handed the damaged passport back to her carefully, his voice softening. "Don't worry, we will fix this. We'll get you a replacement immediately and make sure you're taken care of." He turned back to Clara, whose confidence had fully crumbled. "As for you," he said firmly, "you'll need to step aside. I'll be reporting this to management at once." The murmur in the crowd grew stronger. Some people nodded in agreement, others whispered about how right it was for her to be held accountable. Maya felt a strange mix of emotions: relief that someone finally believed her, anger that she had been treated so unfairly, and gratitude for the strangers who had spoken up. Clara tried one last time to defend herself. "I didn't mean to cause harm," she said weakly. "I just thought," but Mr. Daniels cut her off. His voice was sharper now, leaving no room for excuses. "You didn't think. You acted recklessly. And in this job, that is unacceptable." Her shoulders slumped. The fight in her eyes was gone, replaced by fear of what was to come. She stepped back slowly, her posture no longer strong and proud but small and defeated. For the first time, Maya saw the cracks in her arrogance. Passengers began clapping again, this time louder, some even calling out words of encouragement to Maya. "Stay strong," one woman said. "You did nothing wrong," another man shouted. Their voices gave her strength, helping her stand a little taller. Maya's journey was not over. The torn passport was still a problem, and the pain of what had happened would not disappear instantly. But in that moment, she realized something important: she was not invisible. People saw her, people believed her, and people were willing to stand with her against injustice. The sound of the applause filled the gate, echoing through the busy airport. Clara's regret was written clearly on her face now, while Maya's courage shone through her tears. And though the situation was far from resolved, everyone watching knew one thing: this young girl's dignity had been defended, and the woman who had tried to take it away was already facing the beginning of her downfall. The atmosphere around the boarding gate grew heavier by the second. Passengers stood still, some clutching their phones, others shaking their heads in disbelief. What had started as a normal morning at the airport had now turned into a scene that felt like a courtroom, with everyone watching closely to see what judgment would fall on Clara, the flight attendant who had crossed the line. Mr. Daniels stood firm, his arms folded across his chest as he looked at Clara. He had seen many things during his long years of service: angry customers, delayed flights, even emergencies in the sky, but what had happened here disturbed him deeply. It wasn't just about a torn passport. It was about the way a young girl had been humiliated without reason, the way Clara had acted out of arrogance instead of care. Before Clara could slip away or come up with another excuse, the airport's floor manager arrived. A woman in her 40s with a sharp suit and a no-nonsense expression, she quickly scanned the scene. The murmurs of passengers, the tear-streaked face of Maya, the torn passport in her hands, and Clara standing stiffly all told her enough before anyone even spoke. "What's going on here?" the manager asked, her voice clear and authoritative. Mr. Daniels stepped forward. "This young passenger was accused unfairly," he explained. "Her passport is genuine. Yet my colleague here decided to damage it, humiliating her in the process. Passengers witnessed everything, and several recorded the incident." His tone carried no anger, only a controlled firmness that made it clear the matter was serious. The manager's gaze shifted to Maya. "Is this true?" she asked gently. Maya nodded, her throat too tight to speak, and handed over the torn passport. The manager examined it, her brows furrowing as she saw the ripped corner. She turned back to Clara, her eyes narrowing. "Did you do this?" Clara swallowed hard. For the first time, her words stumbled. I thought it was fake. I thought I was protecting the airline." Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by nervousness. The manager's voice dropped lower, but it carried more weight than any shouting could. "Protecting the airline? By destroying an official document without verification? By humiliating a young girl who was simply trying to travel?" She held the passport up for a moment, the tear visible to everyone around. "This is not protecting. This is reckless." The passengers nodded, their whispers of agreement spreading like ripples on water. One man called out, "We all saw it. She tore it without a reason." Another added, "It was cruel. The girl did nothing wrong." The evidence was overwhelming, and Clara could feel the walls closing in around her. The manager took a deep breath, then turned to Mr. Daniels. "Thank you for handling this calmly," she said before facing Clara again. Her words were sharp, leaving no space for argument. "Clara, you're relieved of your duty effective immediately. You will not be boarding this flight. Security will escort you to the office where this matter will be handled further." Clara's face drained of color. "You can't fire me here, in front of everyone," she whispered, her voice shaking. But the manager didn't flinch. "You left us no choice. Your actions were public, your disrespect was public, and now your consequences will be public." The silence that followed was broken by soft applause from the passengers. It wasn't loud or mocking, it was the sound of people acknowledging that justice was being done. Clara's eyes darted around, meeting nothing but disapproval. Her lips quivered as if she wanted to protest, but the words refused to come. For the first time, she felt the crushing weight of her own actions. Maya stood quietly, watching as the woman who had tried to shatter her dignity now stood small and powerless. Her heart was still heavy from the pain, but she also felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was being seen, and for once, she wasn't the one being silenced. Airport security arrived moments later, two officers in dark uniforms. They spoke briefly with the manager before approaching Clara. "Ma'am, please come with us," one of them said. Clara's eyes widened as she realized the moment had truly arrived. She looked at the passengers, perhaps hoping for sympathy, but found none. Even her fellow crew members stood quietly, avoiding her gaze. As she was led away, Clara's shoulders slumped. Her proud stride was gone, replaced by slow, uncertain steps. The murmurs of the crowd followed her until she disappeared around the corner. The once powerful flight attendant had been reduced to nothing more than a warning, an example of how arrogance and cruelty could lead to downfall. The manager turned her attention back to Maya. She knelt slightly to meet the young girl's eyes. Her voice softened, carrying warmth that had been missing until now. "I'm deeply sorry for what happened to you. This should never have taken place. We will make sure your passport is replaced immediately, and you will still make your trip. Maya blinked back tears as she nodded. Thank you, she whispered. The words seemed too small for the gratitude she felt, but they were all she could manage. The manager straightened and addressed the crowd. Thank you all for your patience. We will resume boarding shortly. If anyone wishes to submit a statement about what they witnessed, we welcome it. Several passengers nodded, some already preparing to share their videos or comments. The sense of unity in the crowd was strong. They had all been witnesses to injustice, and now they wanted to ensure the truth was preserved. Maya was escorted gently away from the gate to the airline's office, where staff comforted her and offered her water. They worked quickly with officials to arrange emergency travel documents. The torn passport was treated as evidence, and arrangements were made with the immigration office so Maya wouldn't miss her journey. Every staff member she met now treated her with respect and care, trying to undo the damage that had been done. As she sat in the quiet office, Maya finally allowed herself to breathe. The tears that had been held back spilled freely, but they were mixed with relief. She thought of her parents at home, imagining their pride when she told them she hadn't given up, even when things looked hopeless. She thought of her mother's note in her pocket, and she realized how true those words had been. She was stronger than she knew. Meanwhile, Clara sat in a small, plain room with security outside the door. Her uniform still looked sharp, but her spirit was broken. She replayed the moment in her mind, the rip of the passport, the shocked gasps, the disapproving eyes, and the humiliation of being escorted away. Regret clawed at her chest. She had let pride and prejudice blind her, and now her career, her reputation, and her dignity were slipping away. Back at the gate, passengers talked among themselves, their voices filled with both sympathy for Maya and disapproval for Clara. That poor girl, one woman said softly. She handled it with such grace. A man added, the airline did the right thing firing her. No one should be treated like that. The incident had left a deep impression on everyone who had witnessed it, reminding them of how quickly arrogance could be exposed and how important it was to stand up for what was right. As the plane finally prepared to board again, the mood had changed. There was no more impatience or frustration. Instead, there was a quiet respect, an unspoken agreement among the passengers that they had seen something important, a lesson about justice, kindness, and accountability. Maya, though still shaken, was stronger now. She had faced humiliation, but she had also seen fairness win in the end. And though Clara's regret would haunt her, Maya's courage would carry her forward to the new adventure that awaited her. Maya sat quietly in the airline's VIP lounge, her torn passport resting on the small table in front of her. The polished floor gleamed, soft chairs surrounded her, and staff members moved around kindly, offering her water, juice, and snacks. But Maya barely touched anything. She still felt the sting of what had happened. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers twisting together nervously, while her eyes remained fixed on the damaged document. It was supposed to be her ticket to new beginnings. She had dreamed of the moment she would show her passport at the gate, smile proudly, and step onto the plane. Instead, her dream had nearly been crushed by the careless hands of someone who didn't believe in her. A lump formed in her throat, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself of her mother's note, "You are stronger than you know. Don't give up." She repeated the words silently, over and over, until her heart calmed just a little. An airline representative, a kind woman named Rosa, approached with a gentle smile. She carried a folder filled with documents and knelt down so she was at Maya's eye level. "Maya," she said softly, "we've contacted the immigration office and explained everything. They're preparing an emergency travel document for you right now. It will allow you to travel on today's flight, and once you arrive, the embassy will replace your passport properly." Her voice was warm, steady, and reassuring. Maya's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief. "Really?" she whispered. Rosa nodded firmly. Yes, really. You're not going to miss your trip. We promise. She reached out and gently squeezed Maya's hand. You've been through a lot today, but I want you to remember something: none of this was your fault. You were brave, and everyone saw that. Those words sank deep into Maya's heart. She thought back to the passengers who had defended her, the man who had spoken up, the woman who had recorded the video, and even the small claps of encouragement she had heard after speaking her truth. Strangers had stood by her side when she needed it most, and that thought made her chest swell with gratitude. Meanwhile, outside the lounge, the story of what had happened was already spreading. Passengers who had witnessed the incident posted about it online. Some uploaded videos showing Clara ripping the passport, others wrote about how Maya had been treated unfairly. Comments flooded in quickly. People expressed outrage at Clara's behavior and admiration for Maya's strength. "This girl deserves the world," one comment read. Another said, "I hope she never forgets that she was right, and the world stood with her." The story was growing larger than the airport itself. Back in the quiet lounge, time passed slowly as Maya waited for the documents to arrive. She thought about her parents at home. They didn't know what had happened yet. She imagined calling them, telling them about Clara's cruelty, about how close she had come to losing her chance to travel. But she also imagined telling them about Mr. Daniels, about the manager, about the passengers who had clapped for her. She could already picture the tears in her mother's eyes and the proud smile on her father's face when they learned she had stood tall, even when the world seemed unfair. Finally, Rosa returned, holding a new paper in her hands. "Here it is," she said with a smile. "Your emergency travel document. This will let you board the plane." She handed it to Maya carefully, as though it were precious. Maya took it with both hands, staring at the official stamps and signatures. Relief washed over her like a warm wave. Her trip was still alive. When it was time to board again, Rosa walked with her back to the gate. The atmosphere had shifted. Passengers who had seen everything smiled warmly as she passed. Some whispered words of encouragement. "We're glad you're here," one woman said softly. A man gave her a thumbs up. Maya's cheeks flushed, but she smiled shyly, grateful for their kindness. As she stepped onto the plane, the remaining crew welcomed her with gentle nods and smiles. One attendant even said quietly, "We're sorry for what you went through. You'll be safe here." Maya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to relax just a little. She found her seat by the window and placed her small suitcase in the overhead bin. As the engines hummed and the passengers settled, Maya leaned her head against the cool glass and looked out at the runway. The sky stretched wide and endless, a symbol of the journey ahead. Her heart beat faster, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from anticipation. She was finally about to take flight. When the plane lifted off the ground, Maya closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek, but it was a tear of triumph. She had faced humiliation, but she had also witnessed justice. She had been doubted, but she had been believed. She had almost lost her chance, but she had held onto it with all her strength. The plane soared higher and higher, carrying her toward her new adventure. Back on the ground, Clara's story was very different. She sat alone in a small office, her uniform still perfect but her career in ruins. Her mind replayed the scene again and again: the sound of the passport tearing, the gasps of the passengers, the cold words of her manager, and the humiliating walk with security. Regret filled her heart like heavy stones. She realized too late how one careless moment, fueled by arrogance and prejudice, could destroy everything she had built. She would never forget the look in Maya's eyes, the mixture of hurt and courage. That look would haunt her for years. For Maya, the experience became something much larger than a single flight. By the time she arrived at her destination, she had messages from friends and even strangers who had seen the story online. People called her brave, strong, and inspiring. She didn't see herself that way. She still felt like the same nervous girl who had clutched her passport at the gate, but the encouragement reminded her that she was capable of more than she ever thought. In the quiet of her hotel room later that night, she finally called her parents. As soon as her mother answered, Maya's tears spilled again, and she told the whole story: the cruelty, the tearing of the passport, the strangers who defended her, and the justice that followed. Her mother cried with her, her father's voice broke with pride, and together they reminded her once again of the note she carried: "You are stronger than you know." Maya lay down on her bed, exhausted but hopeful. The trip ahead still awaited her: the cultural exchange, the new friends, the experiences she had dreamed of. But she knew that no matter what happened, she had already learned one of the most powerful lessons of her life. Even when the world doubts you, even when someone tries to take away your dignity, the truth shines through, and courage can carry you through the darkest moments. As she drifted to sleep, the plane ride replayed in her mind: the lift into the sky, the freedom of breaking away from the ground, the endless horizon ahead. She realized her journey was no longer just about exploring a new country. It was about exploring her own strength. And though the day had begun with tears and fear, it had ended with courage, justice, and the promise of brighter days to come.